rear track angle adjustments. We'll be using a 30mm wrench, a 19mm wrench, a vice grips, and a marker. To adjust the carriage, we need a gap between the spring and the nut and between the rubber dampener and the nut. The first adjustment is this rubber damper tension. I tighten the nut just so it contacted this rubber dampener. I mark the nut so I can count the number of turns. I'm going to turn this one turn. One turn is the specification. I just tightened the nut so it contacts the spring. I then mark the nut with the magic marker so I can keep track of the number of revolutions. The specifications is 4 turns of pressure against this spring by this nut. I'll start turning it and count the number of turns. 1. 2, 3, 4. The spring adjustment is completed. After all the adjustments are completed, I like to confirm the tightness of the ball joint nut against the stabilizer rod. Doing so, I attach a vice grips to the rod, 19mm wrench, and just confirm the tightness. This will complete the adjustment of the rear track carriage. Using the same adjustment procedures and specification, make the adjustments to the left track carriage. In 2012, Camoplast redesigned the anti-rotation bracket. This is an adjustable bracket. The 2012 stabilizer rod adjustments are as follows. With this new adjustable bracket, we want the stabilizer rod to be 90 degrees to this bracket. To do that, push the rubber dampener into the bracket so it's sitting squarely in the bracket. Once the rubber dampener is in the bracket squarely, tighten up the adjustable bolts. We'll torque these later. So now the rubber dampener is sitting squarely in this adjustable plate, so is the spring. We'll now rotate this nut until it contacts this rubber dampener. And this is a visual check, and it can also be done by feel. Just turning the rubber dampener to see if you feel any drag. And right now there's some drag between the rubber dampener and nut. The next adjustment is to bring the nylock nut just so it contacts the spring. Okay, the nylock nut is now contacting the spring. We're going to mark the nut. And we're going to rotate it 2 turns to get the specification. One. 2. Adjustment is completed. Front track angle adjustments. The tools required to perform these adjustments are a magic marker, vice grips, 19mm wrench, 30mm wrench, a tape measure, and a flat bar. We'll be making adjustments to this nut and this nut. But in starting this, we first have to have some clearance between this nut and this spring. And currently, we don't have any clearance here right now. To do so, vice grip the stabilizer rod and loosen the 19mm lock nut. All right, now that the lock nut is loose, we can extend the rod. We'll just turn the rod. Until there's no contact between the nut and spring. At that point, we will lock this nut. Now we have to tighten the lock nut. The specification is less than 19 millimeters of exposed threads can be shown. The front track angle is determined by the rear idler wheel height. The specification is 315 millimeters plus or minus 5. We'll measure from the ground to the bottom of the bar, and we are out of specification and it will require adjustment. To achieve the correct rear idler wheel height, we'll have to adjust this nut against this rubber dampener. I'll start by turning this a few turns, and then we'll check the idler wheel height. I think we're pretty close. I am applying a little pressure to the front of the track to remove any free play in the system. I'll measure from the floor to the bottom of the bar, and I'm at 312 millimeters, and that's within specification. Okay, I adjusted this nut so it's just touching the spring. The specification is 1.5 turns of preload against this spring by this nut. I'll turn this nut 1.5 turns. One. And a half. The front track angle is adjusted. We completed the right carriage, front carriage adjustment. We'll use the same procedures and specifications to the left side now.